you don't do science by reading it. You do science by doing it, by experimentation, by asking questions. I had great mentors and teachers, okay? And they were key influencers and how I thought about science, to think about the ethics and the science and the integrity of problem solving, and how to be curious and not to ever let failure get in your way. Failure actually gives you more answers than you know. So, in that sense, science opened my world in a new way of thinking about the world.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information.
I am thrilled to introduce today's guest, Maya Ajmera. Maya is the president and CEO of Society for Science, an executive publisher of Science News. She's also the founder of the Global Fund for Children, which I'm really excited for you to learn about. Here are 3 things I think you should know about Maya. Number 1, she herself is an alumna of the Westinghouse Science Talent Search, now sponsored by Regeneron, which is the signature program of the Society for Science. As CEO, she's helped to transform the 100-year-old society into a dynamic, entrepreneurial organization. I'm especially impressed by how she brought Science News Media Group from a decade-long deficit into a growing enterprise by developing a new education pillar and diversifying the group's income stream. Number 2, at age 23, Maya founded Global Fund for Children, a nonprofit organization that invests in community-based organizations working with vulnerable children and youth. It grew into one of the largest networks of grassroots organizations working on behalf of vulnerable children, and has awarded over $65 million to more than 900 innovative grassroots organizations, helping more than 11 million children worldwide. Those numbers keep going up. Number 3, Maya has demonstrated the ability to influence adults and young people. She is an award-winning children's book author with more than 20 titles to her name, including Back to School, Every Breath We Take, and Children from Australia to Zimbabwe. Maya, you have been called many things, from a CNN hero, American Academy of Arts and Sciences inductee, to National Science Board Public Service Award winner, social entrepreneur in residence at Duke, Aspen Institute Henry Crown Fellow, Echoing Green Fellow, award-winning author, founder, CEO. Well, today we are thrilled to call you Chief Influencer. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is so impressive to read your background and just learn about everything you've done. And I want to go back and just start. Global Fund for Children grew from a seedling vision into one of the largest networks of community-based organizations working on behalf of vulnerable children and youth around the world. And you were only 23 when you founded it. So who do you have to influence to envision, to build, scale, and then hand off an organization like this?
Well, for me, I'll start with, I had a fellowship after college that allowed me to travel from South and Southeast Asia. And I ended up in India. And I had wonderful professors who said, Maya, if you really want to understand people and understand their aspirations, get a backpack and start traveling for a year. And so I traveled from Thailand to Pakistan. It was in India where I say I had my moment of obligation. I got off at a train station in Bhubaneswar in India, and I saw 50 kids sitting in a circle learning how to read and write in a train station, which is a very chaotic place. And this teacher in the middle was teaching kids with flashcards, and these children were obviously quite destitute. And I asked the teacher, I speak Hindi. She spoke the native language of Oread. So we were able to communicate with a friend, but she said these children live on and around the train platform. They work, they play, they beg, they sleep, they eat, but they don't go to school. So a social entrepreneur decided, named Inderjeet Khurana, that I'm going to bring the school to the children. And so she brought a basket of magic and some chalk and slate. And she had one kid, then two, then four, then eight, and then 12. And she had a train platform school. I asked the teacher at that time, what does it cost to run one of these schools? And she said it cost $500 a year with two teachers, a meal every day. And it was there that I had that moment. How do we support these innovative community-based organizations? And how come we don't see more train platform schools all over India? In that more sophisticated language of the nonprofit speak, as we say, is how do you get small amounts of capital into the hands of really innovative grassroots organizations around the world and help them become scalable and sustainable? So, when I think about influencing, I think about influencing in two ways. One is the grassroots organizations that we supported and partner with are huge influencers, right? We're learning from them, right? And that's absolutely important of being an influencer, is that you always are learning from everyone else. And with the Global Fund for Children, it's really our grassroots partners around the world. And, the influence that I had in terms of being able to build Global Fund for Children when I was 23 years old was really based on hard work and some luck, frankly. Louis Pasteur once said, luck favors the prepared mind, right? And so I had the most extraordinary plane ride. I was bumped onto business class on a plane, and I sat next to a gentleman who was very interested in my work. And I was writing my first children's book, Children from Australia to Zimbabwe. I made this gentleman guess countries down my alphabet book. A is for Australia, B is for Brazil, C is for China. And he couldn't guess the country. He starts with X. And I said, well, you have to be a 6-year-old. You have to be a kid. You have to stretch your mind to the very outer limits of imagination. And he said, it's Xanadu. And I said, huh. And I said, well, that's why you're the chairman of Morgan Stanley, Mr. Fisher. And I sat next to the chairman of Morgan Stanley. These days, they don't take business class on flights. They have their own jets. But I was very lucky because I had been bumped onto this flight. And I must have influenced him with this vision. And he became a major angel to the organization. I was able to speak to 3 venture capitalists from General Atlantic who helped start Echoing Green, that funds social entrepreneurs around the world. And I told them about this vision of the Global Fund for Children. And I must have done something. I call it hallucinogenic optimism as part of my influencing strategy. and that hallucinogenic optimism must have convinced them to invest my first seed money of $25,000 a year. That's what it started with, was $25,000.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that is incredible. Number one, the luck favors the prepared. And I love that you just, it's very easy to sit on a plane and not talk to the person next to you, right? But to build that relationship the way that you did with the chairman of Morgan Stanley. And then I like that hallucinogenic optimism, because at some point on the outside, you have to have this, your optimism has to be sort of, beyond the pale of what's normal for you to think you can start something like this. But obviously you did. And it sounds like the power of storytelling might have been important to you early on, because you told a beautiful story about how you encountered this, opportunity on the train platform and learning about that school. And obviously you spoke to the teacher and asked questions. And then you used a great storytelling technique with a future funder on the plane. Can you talk a little bit about that and just sort of your approach to storytelling? And is that important for influence?
Absolutely. Storytelling is the key to influence, in my opinion, right? Because it gets personal. You try to make a connection with someone when you develop a story. And usually people can relate to the story in some way. And that connection stays with you for a long time. Let me go back to the airplane gentleman. I waited 2 years to go see him. I had the book in hand. I wrote him a letter. His assistant remembered. Assistant said, Mr. Fisher would like to see you again. I went up to the 54th floor, whatever, of Morgan Stanley. I handed him the book and I said, you probably don't remember me, but here's the book. Thank you so much for seeing me. And he said, Maya, of course I remember you. You made me guess countries down an alphabet book and told me about the larger vision. It was 2 years. It was more than 2 years. And he remembered, right? So if you're an influencer, how do you get people to remember? Not me in particular, but the story, right?
Yeah.
Of what we're trying to do. And for me, it was helping to support the most vulnerable children and youth in the world.
When you talk about those strategies for people to remember, obviously with him, it was interactive, right? I mean, you engaged him in a game almost, right? A quiz. And I think that's kind of a good segue to thinking about what your organization does now. So today you serve as CEO of the Society for Science. And that organization is best known for several things: the Science News Media Group, the world-class science competitions, including the Regeneron Science Talent Search, which you participated in years ago, the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, and the Thermo Fisher Scientific Junior Innovators Challenge. And then there's a suite of outreach and equity STEM programs that you all manage as well. But I'd love to start with the Science Talent Search because you yourself competed in this, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that interactive element, because that seems to be a thread there. But also I'd like to just hear, how has that program changed since you went from being a competitor to now being the CEO of the organization that runs it?
So let me go back even further in my life, right? I'm the daughter of Indian immigrants, brought up in Eastern North Carolina. My father, a professor of physics, electrical engineer, my mother, an entrepreneur. And like any typical South Asian kid, I had two paths, one to be a doctor or to be an engineer. And I loved science growing up. I did science fair experiments and projects, started working in a botany lab when I was in middle school, and competed in science fair. And then I went to an incredible high school called the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics in Durham, the first public residential high school for kids who love science and math. And it was there that I started doing my research for the Science Talent Search project, then called Westinghouse Science Talent Search. And the thing about doing science is that you cannot read, you don't do science by reading it. You do science by doing it, by experimentation, by asking questions. And doing really great science at the age that I was 16 years old, I had great mentors and teachers, okay? And they were key influencers and how I thought about science, right? From everything from middle school, from Dr. Prem Sagal, who was a botanist, to Dr. Vickers Burdett, and so on, to Dr. Margaret Holliday in college, where I majored in neuroscience. All of those folks, gave me sort of the base of how to think about problem solving, right? To think about the ethics and the science and the integrity of problem solving, and how to be curious and not to ever let failure get in your way. Failure actually gives you more answers than you know. So in that sense, science sort of opened my world in a new way of thinking about the world, frankly.
I wonder, I love what you just said about failure giving more answers. And I wonder if I could put you on the spot. I mean, when we go through your bio, you have had many, many successes, many accolades. But it sounds like, I'm sure you, like everyone, has encountered failures that you have learned from. And I wonder what jumps out as you think about that for your own experience as a leader, and perhaps particularly around this idea of influence, if that's, if that's appropriate to that question as well.
There's one particular story about failure. So, with my first book, Children from Australia to Zimbabwe, um, the guys at General Atlantic venture capital firm gave me my Echoing Green Fellowship, and it was to start this first book because that was going to start the Global Fund for Children. Because I was going to be a Harry Potter, I was going to be J.K. Rowling and make millions of dollars, right? I thought every publisher would pick up the book, but I was turned down by every publisher.
Mhm.
I had a publisher who wrote to me and said, "We like the concept, but we don't understand why you chose the countries you did, and you're not a named author, and we just don't think there's a market for it, for the book." And then Echoing Green was going to pull out their next year of support if I didn't figure out how to get this book published. I just decided to do something pretty radical, right? I had failed. I was looking at the mirror and I said, I'm failing. Nobody wants this book. The whole vision's going to go down the sink. And I did something in 1995, 96 when people thought you were nuts to do it, but I self-published Children from Australia to Zimbabwe. I got a book out from the library about how to self-publish a book. I hired an editor. I hired a book designer. I begged funders in North Carolina to give me grant money to create the book. And I would donate 3 copies to every school in North Carolina, public school in North Carolina. And with whatever's left over, I would sell them through a local distributor in bookstores. I did it. We did it. And the books that were in the local bookstores sold out. And the same publishers that had said no to me came back and said, Maya, we want this book and all your other books. And I said, well, I don't think so. And so I found a really interesting publisher in Boston named Charles Bridge that had great multicultural children's books. And I called on a late Monday afternoon, and this man answers the phone, and he said, hello. I said, hi, my name's Maya Ajmera, and I have a really great children's book called Children from Australia to Zimbabwe. Is this something you'd be interested in? And he said, well, Maya, this sounds very interesting. Can you FedEx it to me? I said, sure. Are you the attendant or something? And he started laughing. He goes, no, Maya, I'm the president and publisher of Charles Bridge. I said, what's the president and publisher of Charles Bridge answering their own phone? And he said, well, Maya, it's President's Day, and I thought you were my wife. And so I FedExed him the book. And 3 days later, he said, okay, let's make a deal. And we created the first nonprofit imprint, publishing imprint called Global Fund for Children Books. And that's how the book, and they're still they're still our publisher to this day. So again, influence, storytelling, right? And the book became the influencer. I just want to also state, it's not only me, it was the book that became the influencer. That book and all the others become an influencing tool because, and I'll go to another story about influencing, is that books, children's books, get into a child's room with a parent in the most intimate setting, something that I could never do, right? I could do book readings. I can go to a bookstore. I could read to my own daughter.
Yeah.
And so our books got into these homes and people read about Global Fund for Children. And we got major amounts of donations because of it to people we would never have reached. And that's the same with Science News. Now I'm publisher of the Science News, and we have our magazine. And those subscribers who have read our magazine for decades and decades are now donors to us as well, because they want to see evidence-based science journalism, and they want to see journalism stay alive because it's a core to our democracy.
Yeah.
So I think of the magazine, I think of books, I think of them as influencing tools.
And what I love about those examples is you're really thinking about, I mean, I don't know if you built them to do this, but what's that experience of the person I want to connect with? And you're making that human connection, and then you're bringing them on a journey where they might first interact with you and the tools that you create because, their child has the book, they're reading the book to their child, and they learn about the bigger picture, and then they go through that journey, and now they become donors and supporters, and they help you, create more tools and scale those tools, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it's incredible to think about that. And I guess some of that you may have in the back of your mind when you start these journeys. And then some of this may develop along the way. And you may never have thought about how, wow, having that book in a child's room could be a tool to get more parents to donate, but then you realize it happens and you can build on it.
Well, you want them to learn. Right. You want the kids and parents to learn, right, from the book itself. It's an educational book. But what I never realized is it became a social marketing tool in many ways
Yeah.
of a larger vision and a brand, right? And that's what, to me, Science News is not only one of only two consumer magazines left in the United States, science magazines left, but it's also a really important tool to influence the next generation of readers, right? We're in nearly 6,000 schools being used by millions of students and nearly 20,000 STEM teachers in this country. Think about these students who are using Science News as a learning tool in their classroom, but most likely, we hope that a good fraction of them will grow up and start subscribing to Science News as adults.
Well, and I want to take a step back about science here because we've all read the headlines about the news media crisis, and it's a tough business model. I'm a former journalist myself and used to be on the board of the National Press Club, so I've seen firsthand this challenge, and I'm really interested in how you took Science News Media Group from running a deficit for a long time and turned it into a growing enterprise. And I know you did this in part by developing a new education pillar. So can you talk about that? Because I have a feeling there are other leaders, whether it's they're looking at other media organizations and products that might be struggling, or other legacy parts of their business, for example, they're trying to reinvent them. You really reinvented this and turned it around, and it's been a huge success. So I'd love to dive into that story a bit more.
Anthony, what's interesting about the model is the fact that trying to get to the next generation of readers, right? If we're going to combat misinformation and disinformation, we need to start with young people, right? And bring them along. One of the things that occurred to me when I came on in 2014 was we needed to hear from teachers. And we asked teachers about science, about scientific content. And they said, science is changing so rapidly. I have textbooks that I'm using are 20 years old, and I don't know what to trust online. And we said, here's Science News, one of the most credible science magazines in the country or world. Why not test this in the classroom? So what we did was we asked the teachers, well, why don't you just work on digital and not do paper? Like, nope, we need paper. Okay. 10 copies to a school. You get a teaching guide with every magazine, and you have to apply for the product. You have to apply and tell us how you're going to use it. We did that in 2015, I believe, with 250 schools. It grew like wildfire, and we're now in 6,000 schools, and we have a huge waiting list. It costs then $500 a school for the year to get this product into the classroom, into the school. And we built a teacher community of 20,000 plus STEM teachers. Okay. That piece of work became very, it really got us out of our deficit, frankly. But it also became something very important around marketing to the next generation. That could be our future readers of Science News. And then we started really listening to the science teachers saying, I need Science News, but I need it at an easier grade level for our younger students. And so we created a new, we have Science News Explorers online, but we did a paper magazine called Science News Explorers. When people are shifting back from paper, We actually have invested and created a new magazine called Science News Explorers. It started 18 months ago. It started with 0 subscriptions. By the end of this year, it'll be 2 years, we will have over 30,000 subscribers.
That's
And it's
amazing.
just growing. It's just like this, right? And so we're seeing a market need, right? We're listening to the market. We're listening to teachers. We're listening to parents. And we're listening about what this next generation needs.
Well, I love a couple of the things that you said there that are really at the root of like how this strategy worked. One is, you're listening to the market, and trust and misinformation is a challenge. And then you go in the classroom, and I remember having this experience when I was younger too. You learn something in science class, 3 years later, it's changed because science is not static.
That's
And
right.
you go, well, wait a minute, that was a planet, now it's not a planet. And so a magazine is a really great, cost-effective solution. But also, since kids are so digitally connected now, I have to think, just from the experience I have in my own life, that there's something actually really special for them about getting that paper magazine, like the new product that you put out, Science News Explorers, and that is meeting that need, not just of the teachers, right, that want to make sure they get the best information,
The
of the
kids
young
love it.
people. The kids like it.
Yeah, the kids love it. And, I have an 11-year-old daughter. She loves it. She reads it. Um, and it's one of the only science magazines out there for kids that age,
Yeah.
frankly, written by science journalists, the
Yeah.
only magazine written by science journalists of that age.
So we talked a little bit about, I mean, you shared kind of your own experience, like what you needed to self-publish. You went to the library and got the book, and you talked about competing in the experience, and obviously, the magazine that's being delivered to these schools. So some things, obviously just don't change. But then when we think about so much in the world has changed, I wonder if you could talk about your experience, especially having been on both sides of, one of the key competitions. What has changed?
Right.
How do we have to adapt how we influence young people in today's environment? Because, there are a lot of things that have evolved, obviously. And I'd love to hear how you see that as the leader of the Society for Science, and also how, that impacts how such an established organization with 100+ year history adapts its offerings, because these core offerings continue to be successful. You haven't significantly changed these contests or these offerings. You have new sponsors who've stepped in. So you're obviously finding a way to adapt and to continue to provide value for young people today.
The competitions have not changed, which is really amazing. When I did Westinghouse Science Talent Search, it's pretty much the same. The rules are tighter and stricter, and there's now the advent of AI and how the rules and regulations because of the advent of technology, whether you can use that for good or not so good, right? I think one of the things that's really important on the influencing side is making sure that all young people in this country can become a scientist or engineer if that's what they want to be when they grow up. And to have the opportunity to do science, to do project-based learning, to tinker, right? To tinker, to create, to make. And, that is something we have had to really adapt to, right? I won't mince words here. When I came on board, you know, it was thought of as an elitist competition, right? Kids from the best schools, right? That's changing, right? It used to be a very New York focus and a very California. Now we're seeing kids from many states, from Mississippi to Utah to Idaho, and we're seeing them win the big prizes, right? You know, Talent is everywhere, opportunity is not.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure we give all young people the opportunity to be part of this community. And part of my job is to influence this next generation that you can solve the world's most intractable problems. Don't be afraid of climate change. See something in your own community that you think, that's a problem. What can I do to solve it?
Yeah. It's pretty, I mean, I get the enthusiasm from you. I think, wow, it's really exciting to think when so many more young people are exposed to this and know that they can be part of something, I mean, the possibilities for everyone expand, right? Because we want all of the smartest people in the world, doesn't matter where they're from or where they were born or whatever, to be, using science to make the world a better place. And that's also kind of the same thing inside organizations. Leaders who are influential and they empower anybody on their workforce to come up with ideas and to share openly. The best ideas bubble up, right? It creates more opportunities for everybody. So having your own experience going through the competition and then now just growing that pie and expanding access, that must be really energizing for you, I can imagine. I feel like I sort of hear it as you're talking, but I'd love to just hear more about that experience for you, having been through it yourself.
Having been through this,
The competition, yeah, just and
yeah,
seeing how so many more young people now have are bringing these ideas forward and using science, because you said the competition was seen as sort of more elitist. You had a lot of New York, California. It just must be really energizing to see how
I'm
this is.
just energized by the young people come through and just their ability to just look at problem solving in new ways, right? I'm just amazed at how they can use technology in a way that I just never thought. I'm an old person, right? I'm an older person. And I think of technology and I'm going, whoa, and artificial, and they're using it as a tool, right? To solve the world's most intractable problems. I think that's amazing, frankly. Um, and as somebody who participated and competed and was, part of this alumni community, we have 80,000 alumni. When you look at that alumni base, from Nobel Prize winners to MacArthur Award winners to the co-founders and co-CEOs of Regeneron, who now sponsor it, they competed in the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. We are building the next generation of young people who are going to um, solve the world's most intractable problems, but they're also going to be part of building the global economy, frankly. And that actually is a good thing. And what's even better is having a lot of diverse voices to do that.
You've mentioned community a couple times. You have this community of alumni. And then you also mentioned the community of, I think it was 20,000
STEM teachers.
Yeah, the STEM teachers. And I wonder if you could talk a little, maybe around the STEM teachers, you could talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of leaders see opportunity to build community and how much community can learn from one another. At the same time, it's not easy, right? Because, there's everybody has lots of distractions. There's lots of places that they can go to find information, interact with one another. And so just saying, oh, let's build a community. I mean, that's it doesn't just happen. So I wonder if you could share any lessons from the communities that come together, and maybe the STEM teachers might be a good place to focus.
Sure. So communities are built organically. You can't just say, we're going to form a community. One of the ways, at least with the nearly 20,000 STEM teachers in this community of science news learning program, is that they're part of a national program. We're bringing science news, this tool, into their classroom, and they're using it with their students. And so then they get some professional development. They're on webinars, and they're getting this sort of professional development in ways that they may not be getting um, from other sources, right? And so I think communities are built organically. I'll be honest, when I came in 2014, we didn't have an alumni community. I'm an alum, and nobody had ever reached out to me. And I said, we need to change this. This is a powerful group of individuals who can make incredible change. And so we had to build that from the ground up, where I would be calling alums out of the blue. I would Google their names, write an email to them, pick up the phone. Some of them serve on my board now. I mean, that's how we built it. And that's pretty fun.
I love those examples that you shared, Maya, because one, in the last one you just shared about the alumni, you didn't just hope that they would come find you. You're reaching out as the leader and you're, inviting them to participate. And I think that's so key, that two-way nature of community building. But the other piece that I thought was really great when you were talking about the the STEM teachers as part of Science News Learning. When you think about the offering that you brought out to schools and to teachers and to students with Science News, it's so much more valuable for the teachers when they have an opportunity to not only learn from you, but to learn from one another. I assume about maybe how they teach it, and then they get to meet their peers, because a science teacher from one school doesn't necessarily know a science teacher from the school
That's
down
right.
the road, but they would like to know, or across the country, but they could learn a lot from one another. And so, influencing by creating an opportunity for people to influence one another, even when you're not always able to be in the middle of that, I think that's a really powerful lesson. And I've seen lots of examples of that lately, but I think especially what you're doing at the society, I think it could inspire a lot of leaders to think about, even if they're in a totally different sector, how they might be able to do that themselves.
Absolutely. And going back to our alumni community, they influence each other, right?
Yeah.
We just came back from the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair, the largest pre-collegiate STEM competition in the world. And these nearly 1,700 finalists, you know, are all influencing each other in really great ways. They're going to start companies together. They're going to do joint projects together. That's what we want to see. We want to see building community.
Yeah, it's incredible. And they're so smart. And they're doing such incredible stuff. They're raising the bar every year. So every year, this fair just gets, more advanced and more impressive, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It's a very special place, especially with everything that's going on in the world today, right? Science ties people together, and that's a beautiful thing.
I know a theme of your leadership, not just at the society, but across your career, has been elevating others. And we've heard some really good examples of that. I wonder if you could talk about some of the ways you do that as a leader at the society.
As a leader, I'll put it out this way. I hire really, really smart people to surround me who know so much more than I do. And then you try and get out of their way and let them go do what they do best. And so my way of influencing within the Society for Science is getting out of the way, hiring really, really smart people. And I really love people who take initiative, right? Saying, hey, Maya, I have an idea. What do you think? Okay, go for it. So I love the entrepreneurial energy in the organization.
One of the things I've noticed that you do that I'd love for you to talk about is Tuesday Trailblazers on LinkedIn. I think this fits along this theme of elevating. Can you tell us what that is?
Every Tuesday, we're taking a break this for the summer now after Memorial Day, but we'll back after Labor Day. I basically highlight an extraordinary alum or social entrepreneur out there that deserves just me to have a connection to. Like, this is somebody I know and somebody I admire and somebody who's doing really great things in the world. And I I've really enjoyed it. It's been really amazing. I've had some really amazing people on there. John Hecklinger, who is the current CEO, co-CEO, Global Fund for Children, to Kennedy O'Dade, who's the founder and CEO of Shining Hope Communities, to Meg Garlinghouse, who heads up social impact for LinkedIn. Just some really amazing human beings, and how privileged I am to know them.
I really like that example because a lot of leaders, they're like, I feel like I need to lean into my personal brand and use LinkedIn or other social media more, but I don't just want to talk about myself. What should I do? How should that fit into my strategy? And I think what you do with Tuesday Trailblazers on LinkedIn is such a good example, because you take others who inspire you and you elevate them and you shine a light on them. And that's great, because now the people who are connected to you, they continue to find value in how you spotlight others and you kind of highlight people that they would like to learn about. But it also really just creates a ripple effect where more people do learn about those folks. And so, I just think that's such a really good example. And it's one that a leader in any industry who's not sure what to do on those platforms could look at that one, you know, simple tactical thing that you do. Not that it's all simple, but it's not, some giant ad campaign or something, right? It's something that's consistent, that's ongoing, but it makes a difference, and you certainly get a lot of reaction and engagement from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other one I have is Conversations with Maya in Science News. And that's every quarter in Science News where I interview an alum of our competitions. And that's a lot of fun too, to see where, you know, an alum has ended up, whether winning the Nobel Prize or starting a company or an academic teaching a new type of course in microbiology. It's just fun. I find these conversations to be fun. It's about storytelling.
Yeah, and I would imagine those stories, as you're continuing to build a community of your alumni, and you feature an alum, you highlight them, they share it, people who know them engage with it. Other alumni see it, and then they say, oh, wait, this is a community I could come and be part of. I haven't been involved since I competed in the talent contest years ago, but now I can sort of come back and do that. So I think that the storytelling, it's really powerful for the brand, but it also supports your goal of being a place where you build community and attract people to that community.
Absolutely.
Maya, I could keep going on and on with you, but we have to wrap up soon. I just want to ask you one last question, which is thinking about how you influence as a leader. Where have you found inspiration outside of your day jobs that impact how you show up and how you influence to achieve impact?
Well, I have the privilege of serving on several other boards, and I am in awe of the leadership of those organizations I serve on the boards of. Dr. Cheryl Dorsey, who leads Echoing Green, Wendy Young, who leads Kids in Need of Defense. I am influenced by leaders, right? And those that aren't even alive anymore, right? I'm influenced by the former chairman of Morgan Stanley, Richard B. Fisher, right? And I'm influenced by my late mother, an entrepreneur who came to this country, not speaking a word of English, but lived the American dream. And so I feel fortunate that it's an amalgam of people that have inspired me.
Maya Ajmera, currently CEO of the Society for Science, you have had such an incredible career from founding the Global Fund for Children at age 23, competing even before that in one of the Society's key programs. And I'm just so moved by how you have influenced everyone from adults like the chairman of Morgan Stanley down to young people who you are inspiring to see that STEM is a place for them and to get involved and to compete in these incredible competitions so that they can solve some of the world's most intractable problems. We took so much away from this. I am just so grateful that you spent time with us today. And thank you for being part of Chief Influencer.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a Chief Influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time.